Hi, welcome back. In this video, I will show you how you can interpret your dreams and use them as a part of shadow work. Dreams aren't just random or meaningless. They contain the contents of the unconscious mind, which still has a lot of influence over you in your day-to-day life, even when you're not aware of it. You can think of it like this: if you truly had full control over yourself and your mind, then why do you get in your own way? Why do you hold yourself back? If you have a goal or a dream, for example, why isn't your life exactly what you want it to be? And that's usually because the life you live is a result not only of your conscious motivations, but also your unconscious motivations. And whenever these two are in conflict with each other, that is when you self sabotage. There's a bit in Modern Man in Search of a Soul that explains this really well that I want to share with you. Jung writes, dreams give information about the secrets of the inner life and reveal to the dreamer hidden factors of his personality. As long as these are undiscovered, they disturb his waking life and betray themselves only in the form of symptoms. And it's in your dreams that you can actually discover these unconscious motivations. They may be fears, insecurities, desires, suppressed parts of yourself that you're not even aware of. And this is also the same idea as shadow work, which I have done a whole video on what it is and how to do it. I will link below if you want to check it out. But it's basically the practice of retrieving these unconscious parts of yourself, bringing them back into consciousness where you can learn to develop and control them. And according to Jung, this is how you realize your full potential as an individual. It's in developing the whole of the personality in this way. Otherwise, the suppressed parts of yourself will continue to influence you in everything that you do. The shadow is like the puppet master of the psyche. Whenever you do something that you wish you didn't do, it's usually because of the influence of the shadow. And this is where you start to notice things like fears, insecurities, limiting beliefs, self sabotage in so many forms. Jung describes shadow work or individuation as the process of establishing a line of communication between the conscious and unconscious in order to integrate its contents and realize the whole self. And a great way to do this is through your dreams. So, how can you learn to interpret your dreams and use this when it comes to integrating your shadow or doing shadow work? Well, I've broken this down into 3 steps that you can try and follow along for yourself. Now, the first step is probably obvious, but you want to write down your dreams. You can start by taking a note of any bits and details you can remember. They don't have to be in logical order, you just need to write them all down, and this may even prompt more memories later on. You can, for example, try to wake up throughout the night to catch yourself in a sleep cycle, or keep a notepad right next to you, and first thing when you wake up in the morning, write down any bits of a dream that you can remember, even if it's the smallest thing. Now, if you have a hard time remembering your dreams, or maybe you say that you don't dream, because this is something I hear from a lot of people, then you want to think of this like a muscle, because remembering your dreams is a habit you need to develop. It's something I worked on so many years for myself to actually get to the point where I can remember at least a few of my dreams every single night. For example, when I first started trying to remember my dreams, I would set multiple alarms for myself throughout the night, and even though this was really annoying, it helped me recall my dreams so well that I even learned to lucid dream after a while. But I find that when I'm most consistent with this, I can remember my dreams the best. So you don't necessarily need to set alarms for yourself throughout the night, but you want to make a habit of remembering any details of a dream that you can. Now, the second step in this is you want to look for associations. Dreams are incredibly personal, and it won't help to look up what certain things mean that you remember from your dreams, unless you're dealing with archetypes. But generally, everything you see in your dream has a meaning that can only be understood by you. Even other people that show up in your dreams are really reflecting aspects of yourself. It's all a mirror back to you. You want to think of these symbols in your dreams as a language, because the message they contain is what you associate with these things in your real life. It's meant to resonate with who you are and the things that are on your mind right now. So once you're looking over your dream that you've written down, you want to break it down into individual pieces and elements and then think of anything that comes to mind. To give you an example of what the step looks like, here's a dream that I had last night. I wrote, I'm standing in a crowded train in London and talking to an old friend on the phone. I'm speaking in my mother tongue, but suddenly I realize that my voice isn't my own. It sounds strange and deep only when speaking German, and I feel too embarrassed to speak, but I also don't want to lose this friend I know I can only speak to now. So this is very short, but it's actually fine. And you'll notice that a lot of dreams are like this, where it's just a little fragment or a little story, but this is enough to pull an interpretation from. If you can remember more, that's great, but don't worry if you don't have this long, fleshed out dream. Little bits like this are fine. And that's why I thought this would be a great example to use because it is short, it is simple, and I can show you how to break this down. For example, in this dream I had, I broke it down into a few elements and took a note of associations that came to mind for me. For example, the crowded train. Now, a crowded train is actually a pretty common setting for me in my dreams, and it usually shows up when I'm feeling stressed. So, this is the first thing that I wrote down. I wrote, I associate it with discomfort, fear, being judged, and uncertainty. It's also an in between space, and it makes me think of waiting. In real life, I spend a lot of time on the train, so I also associate it with time lost. And because it was the very train that I'm taking in my routine now, I also associate it with the present. Now, the next part of my dream was my friend that I was speaking to. I wrote down old childhood friend I associate many memories with, relates to a part of myself. But I was stuck on this, so I decided to move on for now and come back to it later. Next, there was the phone. This seemed like a pretty obvious symbol. It's something I associate with communication, staying in touch, but it didn't seem as significant in my dream as other elements, so I moved on. Next was my voice in the dream. I wrote down that this was a big part of the dream because this is also where I experienced a strong emotion, and this is usually a good indication of what is important in the dream. So you almost want to circle the parts of the dream you wrote down that triggered some kind of emotion in you, that came with a strong impression. My voice is typically something I associate with an insecurity. In this dream, as soon as I started speaking German, my voice changed, and it also increased that feeling of insecurity and embarrassment, which seemed significant. So I wrote that down. And then the last part was the language itself. And this is where I wrote down a big question mark because what is the meaning of the language in the dream? I grew up in Germany, so it's my mother tongue, yet it's a language that I rarely use now, and I've noticed it's been fading a bit, which isn't so good. But I associate it with a part of myself and also a tie to a lot of those relationships and memories that I have back home. And this is where it suddenly clicked because I went back to the friend element of the dream and I realized that this may represent a part of myself that I, through using this language, am trying to reach out to and stay in touch with. This part did confuse me for a while and it took some playing around with different associations until I eventually came back to it. But you can see this is just an example of how you can break down the different elements of your dream and then just start writing down, even in bullet points, any associations, ideas, thoughts that come to mind. For instance, maybe there was a place in your dream that reminds you of somewhere you've been before. Then you want to explore this. What comes to mind? Did you like it? Did you feel unsafe? Did it feel foreign or familiar? If you start to tie things together and speculate, that's a good thing. Keep doing that. Now, the third and final step is the interpretation. You want to draw real life parallels to your dream. Ask yourself, how might this dream relate to your current life situation? And I want to add a few notes at this point because the first thing to keep in mind is that your unconscious will not send you a message that you already know or are conscious of. So the dream's message to you shouldn't already be known. It should feel like a surprise. It should be new information. It should feel like some sort of revelation to you. That's how you know that you've actually found the meaning of the dream. Even if it may be tempting to just find some easy explanation for what it might mean, Jung stresses that when it comes to dream analysis, it's a cooperation between the conscious and unconscious mind. The second thing is if you arrive at a dream interpretation that is self congratulatory or self inflating, then that interpretation is probably incorrect. And similarly to that, the third note I want to add is that if your interpretation puts the blame on others, then that is also incorrect. Dreams are entirely about you, even if you might want to project this onto others. That all of the people in your dreams represent aspects of yourself, even if they look like somebody you actually know. So, keeping all of those things in mind, you now want to sit down with your dream associations, and you want to start piecing them together. It's like a puzzle you can solve. You can think, what do these different symbols and elements stand for? What do they represent to you in your waking life? And then, what is the message of this dream? What is it trying to tell you? For example, I haven't yet spent very much time working out the dream I gave as an example, but I believe at this point that the dream is a bit of a warning. And I say this because of that emotional reaction I had in the dream. And I've just noticed whenever there's a moment that I feel moved or stirred quite strongly, that's very often an encounter with your shadow in a dream. So, one possible interpretation that I wrote down for this dream is that it might be telling me of an insecurity that is brewing in my unconscious around this language. And that this would then be in conflict with my self image and conscious motivations in life. Because if I develop an insecurity around speaking German, which admittedly is something I have very much ignored and neglected in my real life, then this will start to get in the way and unconsciously hold me back in situations where I need it. This is how you always end up self sabotaging. So, before it can come to this, dreams can actually warn you of the comings and goings of the unconscious, what's going on, and give you a chance to bring these things into consciousness so you can actually address them. And the reason I chose this interpretation, or the reason this one clicked, is because it is something that has very much been on the back of my mind, but without realizing it, it's something I've completely ignored and pushed aside, something I've not been wanting to think about. And already, if I think back to the few weeks, I've been avoiding calling old friends and reaching out to them because of my German, because I've been a bit nervous about speaking it and worried that I might trip over my words and sound silly. And I didn't even realize that I had been thinking these things. So, this dream has given me a warning of an insecurity that I need to give attention to, that I can still fix before it's too late. However, I may still change this interpretation, and it's normal that you may spend days and days thinking on a certain dream, and more will come to mind. Maybe certain things will start to click as you hold these unconscious symbols in your mind while going about your real life. You may start to pull those parallels a bit easier. So don't worry if you can't sit down and figure it all out in one go. That's completely normal. And something I've also noticed is that when you start to try to unravel a dream, you may start to have that same dream, or at least the same theme, come up again and again, but with different symbols. And it's trying to convey the same message, but in a more clear or obvious way to you. And that's why it's a really good idea to document your dreams and write them down, because you can maybe refer to the same dreams you have later on that are trying to tell the same message. I've had several dreams in the past where only after the third or fourth dream on the same thing have I been finally able to interpret it. Also, while some dreams can bring something that is hidden into light for you to then bring into consciousness and actually confront and deal with, for example, this insecurity that's shown up in my dream has given me a chance to address it. And now this is something I can make a priority in my life to avoid it becoming an insecurity. However, some dreams may also be interpreted differently, as they may be a compensation for the conscious mind. I'll give you another example from the book for this. Jung tells a story about one of his former students, and he writes, A young man brought me the following dream. My father is driving away from the house in his new car. He drives very clumsily, and I get very excited about his apparent stupidity. He goes this way and that, forward and backward, repeatedly getting the car into a tight place. Finally, he runs into a wall and badly damages the car. I shout at him in a perfect rage, telling him he ought to behave himself. My father only laughs, and then I see that he is dead drunk. There's no foundation, in fact, for the dream. The dreamer is convinced that his father would never behave in that way, even if he were drunk. The dreamer himself is used to cars. He is a careful driver, and very moderate in the use of alcohol, especially when he has to drive. The son's relation to his father is good. He admires him for being an unusually successful man. We can say, without any attempt at interpretation, that the dream presents a very unfavorable picture of the father. What then should we take its meaning to be as far as the son is concerned? Is his relation to his father good only in appearance, or does it really consist of overcompensated resistances? If this is so, we should attribute a plus sign to the dream content. We should have to tell the young man, this is your actual relation to your father. But since I could find nothing equivocal or neurotic in the facts about the son's relation to his father, I had no warrant for disturbing the young man's feelings with such a destructive pronouncement. To do so would have prejudiced the outcome of the treatment. But if his relation to his father is really excellent, why must the dream manufacture such an improbable story to discredit the father? The dream's unconscious must have a distinct tendency to produce such a dream. Has the young man resistances to his father, after all which are perhaps fed by jealousy or a certain sense of inferiority? But before we go out of our way to burden his conscience, and with sensitive young people there's always the risk that we do this too lightly, we had better for once drop the question of why he had this dream and ask ourselves instead, what for? The answer in this case would be that his unconscious clearly tries to depreciate his father. If we take this as a compensation, we are forced to the conclusion that his relation to his father is not only good, but even too good. His father is still too much the guarantor of his existence, and he is still living what I call a provisional life. He runs the risk of failing to realize himself because there is too much father on every side. This is why the unconscious manufactures a kind of blasphemy. It seeks to lower the father and to elevate the son. Now, Jung explains this as an example for the psyche's self-regulating process. Too little on one side results in too much on the other. The relation between the conscious and unconscious mind is compensatory, and it's because of this that when we set out to interpret a dream, we must first ask ourselves, what conscious attitude does it compensate for? This means what part of the conscious mind has fallen out of balance in order to create this compensation in the unconscious. Jung describes this as the dissociation of the personality, and whenever these two realms of the psyche are separated, it causes anxiety. He also writes, this is why every dream is a source of information and a means of self-regulation, and why dreams are our most effective aids in the task of building up the personality. And it's this building up of the personality that he describes as the path to realizing your fullest potential, your unique potential in life, which is ultimately the goal of shadow work. The shadow contains the seeds to your potential, and it's in these unconscious missing pieces of yourself that you need to integrate in order to realize your full potential in life and to not hold yourself back. And dream work is a great place to start. So I hope you found this video helpful. Let me know if you have any questions below in the comments, and feel free to share any dreams you've had as well. I'd be really curious to see them, and maybe we can help each other out. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day. Bye.